You've probably watched movies like The Great Escape and Patton over and over, but there's a good chance you missed these. One of these was banned in America for almost half a century. Another one was so massive they used 10,000 real soldiers. But Hollywood still butchered it. And there's one here bankrolled by an actual communist dictator who brought in Orson Welles and paid him in cash and brandy. These are 10 forgotten war movies from the 60s that are still absolutely worth your time. After The Great Escape hit big, studios wanted more of the same, so we got Von Ryan's Express. This one's set in Italy in 1943, starring Frank Sinatra as an American pilot, shot down near Rome. The Italians pick him up and toss him in a camp. Most of the other prisoners are Brits from the same regiment, led now by Trevor Howard after their colonel's killed. But Sinatra outranks them all, so he takes charge of the escape attempt. It's based on a book by David Westheimer, a navigator who was shot down over Italy himself and spent years as a prisoner of war in the real Stalag Luft III, the same camp from The Great Escape. Even Michael Goodliff, who played Captain Stein, was a real prisoner during the war. He got captured at Dunkirk. Sinatra loved the book, tried to buy the rights, but Fox beat him to it. So instead, he went to Fox directly, offered himself as the lead, even though he was nearly 50 at the time. Good move. The movie did great at the box office, and it's definitely Sinatra's best 60s war film, aside from maybe The Manchurian Candidate. Merrill's Marauders tells a real story from World War II, an American Special Forces unit that fought their way deep into Japanese-controlled Burma without tanks, artillery, or air support. This isn't some romanticized war movie. Guys are dropping from dysentery, exhaustion, heat stroke just as much as from enemy fire. Director Sam Fuller knew exactly what he was filming. He'd actually fought in the war himself. Warner Brothers gave him $1 million budget, and he went out to the Philippines to shoot it, working closely with the US Army. But Fuller and the studio clashed non-stop. Warner Brothers chopped off the original grim ending, jammed in some recycled footage from older war movies to try and give it a more upbeat Hollywood ending. Fuller hated it, asked them to take his name off. Warner Brothers said no, and after that, Fuller refused to work with major studios again. This one's about a British squadron tasked with bombing a cliff in Norway, hoping to collapse it onto a Nazi arms factory. But forget the plot. The real standout here is the aerial footage. No CGI or miniatures here. Those are actual Mosquito planes flown by real pilots, doing insanely dangerous low-altitude maneuvers through fjords and mountains. It's based loosely on Frederick Smith's novel, inspired by real operations like Operation Jericho. Producers got the Royal Air Force's help, and the flying scenes are seriously impressive. They didn't fake anything. These dogfight sequences were so iconic that George Lucas openly admitted he used 633 Squadron as direct inspiration for the Death Star trench run in Star Wars. Some of the stuff between missions, the romance, the cliché sacrifices, feels like filler. But once those planes take off, the movie works perfectly. This film covers the Royal Navy's dramatic hunt for the Bismarck, the Nazis' deadliest battleship, in May 1941. Kenneth More stars as Captain Shepard, a fictional intelligence officer coordinating the attack while real historical events unfold around him, the Hood getting sunk, and finally the Bismarck's destruction by British battleships King George V and Rodney. Director Lewis Gilbert got the Royal Navy to help out, using real wartime ships like HMS Vanguard and HMS Belfast. The big battle scenes used incredibly detailed models filmed at Pinewood Studios, where they had one of Europe's biggest water tanks. Fox released it in America at just the right moment. The Bismarck wreck hadn't been found yet, so everyone was curious about it. Historians loved how accurate it was. Real naval procedures, precise timing, even if the film did simplify things a bit. This was a Yugoslav war epic about partisan fighters evacuating across the Neretva River in 1943. It was the most expensive movie ever made in a communist country at the time, about $12 million, funded directly by Yugoslav leader Marshal Tito as propaganda. It starred big international names, Yul Brynner, Franco Nero, even Orson Welles, who reportedly took the role in exchange for cash and a crate of local brandy. The production went crazy with realism. destroyed actual war-era bridges and trains, built whole villages just to blow them up, and at one point used 10,000 actual Yugoslav troops as extras. The final movie got cut into 4 different versions. The one most Americans saw was a hacked-down, badly dubbed version, cut by an hour, edited so roughly it looked like a trailer stitched together by an amateur. Critics dismissed it as confusing, but in Eastern Europe it became iconic, even got an Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Language Film. Castle Keep's a really unusual war movie from Sidney Pollack. It's not your regular war flick. It's got Burt Lancaster playing a one-eyed major who's protecting artwork in a Belgian castle during the Battle of the Bulge. The Americans are camped out there, the Germans are closing in, but instead of straight-up fighting, most of these soldiers are busy with stuff like chasing a baker's wife, having existential meltdowns, or dreaming about ditching the war completely and just staying behind forever. Pollack was only 26 years old when he made it, filming everything out in Serbia and Montenegro. The US Army straight up refused to help because they thought the movie was anti-war propaganda. Pollack ended up borrowing tanks and artillery from the Yugoslav military, repainting them with fake Nazi symbols. Locals saw this and freaked out, thinking actual fascist propaganda was getting filmed in Belgrade. Tito himself had to step in publicly and calm everyone down. Box office-wise, total disaster. But years later, directors like Terry Gilliam and Francis Ford Coppola would mention it as an influence. Some even think it had a hand in inspiring the tone of stuff like Kelly's Heroes and MASH, though in a more abstract, weird kind of way. The Train's one of those war movies from the 60s that still hold up incredibly well. Burt Lancaster stars again here. This one's directed by John Frankenheimer, and it's dark, grim, and way ahead of its time. The cinematography alone is amazing, but what really makes it stand out is how real and dangerous everything feels. Originally, Arthur Penn was directing, but Burt Lancaster didn't like Penn's slower psychological approach, so Lancaster just fired him after a few days. Frankenheimer stepped in and immediately turned it into a fast-paced, action-heavy war thriller. And the action scenes are nuts. No models, no fake explosions. They blew up real rail yards with real dynamite, partly because the French authorities needed to widen the tracks anyway. The train crash scenes? Real trains actually crashing. No stunt doubles, no proper safety protocols. People got hurt, and Frankenheimer himself later said, "It's a miracle no one got killed." Somewhat of an oddity, Dark of the Sun is a 60s war movie that's not about World War II. Set during the Congo crisis in the early 60s, you've got Rod Taylor leading a team of mercenaries on a mission to retrieve diamonds and rescue hostages during a brutal civil war. This movie shocked audiences at the time for being incredibly violent and graphic. Scenes of torture, machete killings, assault. British censors refused to pass it without big cuts, and the MPAA hit it with an X rating. Even after edits, it remained one of the most brutal mainstream films of the decade. Critics were divided. The New York Times called it ugly and unredeemable, but Quentin Tarantino later championed it as one of the most overlooked action movies ever. Scorsese saw it too. He remembers it as being insanely violent for the time, sadistic even, but said that it should be seen. This one's an Italian-French war movie about a bunch of American and French commandos sent to destroy a Nazi flamethrower installation right before D-Day. Starts off with a fake invasion to trick the Germans and ends in a bloody village battle. It's part of that wave of cheap Euro war flicks from the 60s, shot on leftover spaghetti western sets with actors speaking different languages and dubbed afterwards. Super low budget, less than $200,000, but advertised overseas, with posters falsely claiming it starred famous American actors. For something done so cheaply, they pulled off some pretty impressive scenes, like a realistic beach landing where they buried actual explosives under the sand. Rumor is a couple stuntmen got hurt pretty badly. Its gore and dark tone got it banned in some conservative European markets, and it didn't air on West German TV until the late 80s, because of how graphically it portrayed Nazis burning civilians alive. Army of Shadows is one of those movies that got totally misunderstood when it came out. It's a French film about the resistance during World War II, but it skips the romanticized heroic stuff. The movie itself plays out almost like a mob drama, It's a dark, realistic depiction of what resistance members actually had to do, how they were. Secretive, morally conflicted, sometimes violent, and that made it controversial. In France, May 1968 had people revolting against the Charles de Gaulle administration. When this movie came out, the French art crowd immediately slammed it as pro-de Gaulle propaganda, even though he barely appears in the movie. And since American art house cinemas followed whatever French critics said, they trashed it too, without even seeing it. As a result, the film was basically banned in the US for almost 40 years. Not until 2006 did a restored version finally reach American audiences. Then, critics completely changed their tune. Roger Ebert called it a masterpiece, and it topped critics' lists that year, even though it was nearly 4 decades old. Right now, it still has a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.